The opposition spokesman on finance, Julian Robinson, is insisting that the government must spend more money to protect the poor and vulnerable as the country battles the coronavirus pandemic. Mr. Robinson was making his contribution to the budget debate in Parliament this afternoon. Vashon Brown is covering the debate and now joins us live. Vashon?
Thank you so much, Janella. Well, the opposition spokesman on finance says he understands the context within which the budget was developed. However, he argues that the opposition is concerned that the current budget will not adequately address the economic fallout and the rising inequality that have worsened since the onset of COVID-19 a year ago. It is well known that COVID-19 has significantly affected the Jamaican economy, but opposition spokesman on finance, Julian Robinson, says the country's recovery will depend on the state of the economy pre-COVID. He argues that when the country recorded its first case of COVID-19 in March 2020, Jamaica was already in economic decline.
We were actually 1 quarter away from being classified as being in a recession.
Now with the pandemic, Mr. Robinson says many Jamaicans are hungry. He argues that a large number of Jamaicans cannot afford the minimum amount of food to survive on a daily basis. He says studies show that 45% of households have had to cut back on food.
Chicken back, $60 in 2016 is now $140, an increase of 133%. Cooking oil, $85 in 2016 is now $220, an increase of 158%. Tin mackerel has moved from $55 to $100, an increase of 81%.
As for how much the government has spent responding to the COVID-19 crisis, Mr. Robinson argues that Jamaica has lagged behind significantly. He notes that middle-income countries have, on average, spent 5.9% of their gross domestic product, GDP, to respond to COVID, while Jamaica has spent just 1.6% of GDP. As for the comparison between Jamaica and other Caribbean countries,
as a percentage of GDP, Jamaica spent 1.27% of GDP responding to the crisis. Barbados spent 7.9%. Suriname, 6%. The OECS countries, what we tend to refer to as the small islands, they average between 3.8 to 11%, an average of about 6%. So, Madam Speaker, when you look at the response of Jamaica vis-a-vis our comparable countries in the Caribbean, we are at the bottom.
That, he argues, is not surprising given the level of poverty and food insecurity that exists in the country.
I believe it is important to show why we must do more to protect the most vulnerable and position ourselves for growth.